On the Constructive World of Advanced Spanish Program 4, mum's the word as the standard deviants take the time to teach you all about prepositions. You know, words like above, below, under, and over. We'll also throw in some neat zinger tips, an intro to object pronouns, lots of cool dancing, and some great moments in the history of Spanish.
Opera's time! In Spanish, the correct form for saying you are going to do something is A. Yo plus a plus infinitive. B. Ir plus a plus infinitive. C. I do it plus a plus infinitive. Find out the answer later.
Prepositions are one of the most underrated parts of speech out there.
Too true. People always go on and on and on about verbs and nouns and adjectives, but hey, it's the prepositions that's the wind beneath grammar's wings.
That's why we've decided to spotlight a few of our favorite prepositions, let you know how they work,
and show you a few of their mysterious secrets.
Prepositions are words that are used to show relationships between different parts in a sentence. In English, prepositions are words like above and below, under and over, at, to, and through. An easy way to tell if a word's a preposition is to use the tomato mime test. According to the tomato mime test, a preposition is a word that can be used to orient this tomato with a mime. You can throw a tomato to a mime. You can throw a tomato over a mime. You can roll a tomato beneath a mime or below a mime. You can throw tomatoes at a mime until the mime falls down. These words are all prepositions.
Okay, now that you have an idea about how prepositions work in English, let's talk about how they're used in Spanish. And to do that, we have to let you in on a little secret. Not all of the words and phrases you're about to learn are technically prepositions. Some of them are really things called noun adverbs, but don't worry about that. They work the exact same way as prepositions, so keep that in mind as we go through our examples.
If you've ever taken a course in Spanish, you've probably learned what prepositions you know piecemeal. Little here, little there, little everywhere. Well, get ready to get a mega dose of 16 words and phrases that are used the same way prepositions are used in English. Why 16? We don't know, but here they are. Just insane.
We're going to use chickens to demonstrate our first group of prepositions because, well, chickens rock. First up, cerca de, which means close to, and lejos de, which means far from. So we could say that the chicken is close to the flower. La gallina está cerca de la flor. Or that the chicken is far from the flower. La gallina está lejos de la flor. Cerca de, lejos de. Dentro de means inside of, and fuera de means outside of. So to say that the chicken is in the hen house, we'd say, La gallina está dentro del corral. And if our chicken decided to leave the hen house to go out and get some grub, literally, we'd say, La gallina está fuera del corral. Dentro de, fuera de.
Next up are bajo and debajo de. Bajo and debajo de both basically mean under, beneath, or below.
But debajo de is usually used if you mean below in the physical sense, like if you say, La gallina está debajo de la galería. The chicken is under the porch. Whereas bajo is generally used in the abstract sense, like if you say, La gallina no prefiere una temperatura de 2 grados bajo cero. The chicken does not prefer temperatures of 2 degrees below zero.
The opposites of
Bajo and debajo de
are
sobre and encima de.
they mean above or over, with
Encima de.
meaning above more in a physical sense, like in the sentence,
La gallina está encima de los huevos.
the chicken is above the eggs.
Sobre.
Means over or above in a more abstract sense, like if you say,
La gallina está sobre el cerdo en la jerarquía de la hacienda.
the chicken is above the pig in the hierarchy of the farm.
8 down, 8 to go. While all the prepositions we've covered so far show how two things relate in space, the next 3 show how two things relate in time. They're the words for before, during, and after. Antes de, durante, and después de.
The phrase antes de means before, so you could use it to ask, do you drink water before your meal? ¿Bebes agua antes de la comida? Your friend might answer,
Sí. Y bebo agua durante la comida también.
which means yes, and I drink water during my meal as well. ¿Bebes agua después de la comida?
Sí, bebo más agua después de la comida.
Yes, I drink more water after dinner. That's a lot of water.
Goya!
The next 2 prepositions we'll spotlight are con and sin, which mean with and without. In English, cons and sins are bad things, but in Espanol, they're delightful prepositions.
So if we tell you helado means ice cream and nueces are nuts, we could say,
Ella prefiere helado con nueces, pero él prefiere helado sin nueces.
and you'd understand what we mean. She prefers her ice cream with nuts, and he prefers his ice cream without nuts. Con and sin, with and without.
Woohoo! We're rolling now!
We only have 3 more to go. De, a, and en. These are a little tricky because they really don't have exact translations in English, so let's take a closer look at them.
De can mean of, from, or about. A usually means to, at, by, and en can mean in, at, or on. We told you it can be confusing. Fortunately, you've been using these guys in one way or another since day 1 of learning Spanish. So we're just going to give you a couple quick tips for each. First, what they mean, then a neat zinger tip.
The word de in Spanish usually means of, like if you say, Él es el rey de España, or he is the king of Spain. It can also mean from, as in, soy de Argentina. I am from Argentina. Lastly, they can mean about, as in, ella no habla de la rana. She does not speak about the frog. Now for our de neat zinger tip.
Neat zinger tip! Here's your quick zinger tip for the preposition de. Take another look at the sentences we gave you before. He is the king of Spain, I am from Argentina, and she does not speak about the frog. In each of those sentences, couldn't we really just use the preposition of? The first sentence would be the same, he is the king of Spain. The second one would be, I am of Argentina, and the last one would be, she does not speak of the frog. They make sense, don't they? It might not be exactly the way we would say it in English, but it does make sense. So if you're confused about de, default to the English word of.
There's one more thing we need to show you about the mysterious preposition de. Let's take one more look at that sentence, Él es el rey de España. Suppose you wanted to say, he is the king of the sea. Él es el rey del mar. In Spanish, when the words de and the definite article el are next to each other, you chuck one of the e's and push them together to make one word, del. Kinda like a contraction in English. So instead of saying Él es el rey de el mar, you simply say, Él es el rey del mar. Doesn't that sound better?
Next up, we've got the preposition a. 9 times out of 10, a means to or at.
So Spanish speakers don't really distinguish between to and at. So whether you hurl tomatoes to the mime,
Yo lanzo los tomates a él.
or you hurl tomatoes at him,
Yo lanzo los tomates a él.
you use the preposition a.
But while a usually means to or at, occasionally you'll run across a being used other ways. Like to say by foot, as in to walk by foot, you'd say andar al pie. Which brings us to our next neat zinger tip.
Neat zinger tip! When you think a, think destination. Throwing things at the mime. throwing things to the mime. Walking by foot. In each of these, there's some sort of destination, whether it's the mime or wherever you're walking. So there you go. Destination. It won't help you all the time, but it's a good thing to know. And that makes it a neat zinger tip.
One more thing about the preposition a. Just like de, when a comes before the definite article el, the two get smushed together to make the word al.
Look at our sentence, Yo lanzo los tomates a él. Here everything's fine and dandy, since the a doesn't come before the definite article el. This él has an accent, so it means him. But if we change the sentence to Yo lanzo los tomates a él mismo, now the a and the el must collide. Chuck that e and push them together, because you've got a contraction. Yo lanzo los tomates al mismo.
Now let's go over the preposition en. I like en because it sounds a lot like the two words it usually means in English, in and on. But en can also mean stuff like at or by, which sound nothing at all like en. Okay, let's look at some examples.
The easiest uses of the preposition en are in and on. Like if you say, Ellos están en Perú. They are in Peru. Or, El gato está en la mesa. The cat is on the table. But en can also mean at, as in, Estamos en la tienda. We are at the store. Or, en este momento. At this moment. Confusing? Don't worry. We've got a neat zinger tip!
When you see the preposition en, think about something being in some specific place or time. Like when we say, they are in Peru, the cat is on the table, we are at the store, and at this moment. There's a sense of being at a specific place, whether it's Peru, the table, the store, or the moment. This is different from the a with its destination business because there is no destination. With en, you're already there.
Prepositions are words that are used to show relationships between different parts of a sentence. We showed you 16 words and phrases that function in Spanish the same way prepositions do in English. The trickiest Spanish prepositions are de, a, and en. Tricky because they don't always translate cleanly into English. When you get stuck, remember that de can usually default to the English word of. A usually implies some sort of destination, and en usually involves something being in a specific place.
Part 5, Object Pronouns.
Any language aficionado, like me, knows that pronouns are an important part of any complete grammar breakfast. They provide 9 essential vitamins and minerals, plus can be used to replace nouns in sentences. And my personal favorite thing about pronouns, they pretty much work the same way in Spanish as they do in English. Plus, they stay crunchy in milk.
In this part, we're going to teach you how to use direct object pronouns, indirect object pronouns, and objects of the preposition, as well as how they can all work together. But before we show you how to use them in Spanish, let's do a quick review of how they work in English.
Section A. How do pronouns work?
We're going to kick this section off by dissecting a typical, run-of-the-mill, everyday sentence. Claudia throws the ball to the mime.
In English, a direct object is a noun that receives the action of the verb and usually answers the question who or what. Look at the sentence, Claudia throws the ball to the mime. We know that Claudia is our subject. The verb is throws, and the word that's receiving the action, the direct object, is ball. What's being thrown? The ball.
While a direct object answers the question who or what, an indirect object answers the question to or for whom or what. So, in our sentence, the indirect object is the word mime. To whom is the ball being thrown? To the mime. So, in our sentence, Claudia throws the ball to the mime. Claudia is the subject, the ball is the direct object, and the mime is the indirect object. Now, suppose we write, Claudia throws the ball over the fence to the mime. We know Claudia is the subject, the ball is the direct object, and the mime is the indirect object. But what's the fence? Let's see. You may recognize the word over as being a preposition. Generally, in a sentence with a preposition, the noun that comes right after it is called the object of the preposition. Basically, you just take the preposition and make it a question. Over what? Over the fence. See? Fence is the object of the preposition.
Why do you have to learn all this? As we said earlier, subjects, direct objects, indirect objects, and objects of the preposition work the same way in Spanish as they do in English.
Check out the sentence. La doctora pone una inyección a Mario después del examen, which means the doctor gives a shot to Mario after the examination. We can see that our verb is pone, a conjugated form of the verb poner. So we can say that la doctora is the subject since she's the one doing the giving. What's being given? Una inyección. So it must be our direct object. Después de is a preposition that means after. So we can ask after what? After el examen. So we know that's an object of the preposition. And to whom is the shot being given? To Mario. That makes Mario our indirect object. It also makes him nervous.
Just remember, to find the direct object of a sentence, ask who or what is receiving the action. And to find the indirect object, ask to or for whom or what. And when you're dealing with a preposition, use the preposition itself to make a question, and the answer will be an object of the preposition. Let's do one more sentence in Spanish just to make sure you have the hang of it.
La joven ofrece al gato la leche en una vasija. The young person offers the cat milk in a bowl. Okay, our verb is ofrece, and we know that la joven must be the subject since she's doing the offering. Okay, now what's being offered? Yeah, la leche. So that's our direct object. And to what is the milk being offered? There we go, el gato, the cat. That makes el gato the indirect object. And hey, en is a preposition meaning in, and the milk is being offered in what? In a bowl. So una vasija is an object of the preposition.
While the topic of direct objects is fresh in your noggin, we need to introduce you to the personal a. Spanish speakers use the personal a before the direct object of a sentence when the direct object is a person or a pet, as opposed to a thing. That personal a signals to the listener, hey, buddy, the action of my sentence is happening to a real live person.
Great moments in the history of Spanish. Once, long ago, in the early days of Spanish, one Señora Sanchez was admiring her plant.
Yo veo mi planta.
Then her loving husband walked into the room.
Veo mi esposo.
But Señor Sanchez was hurt.
¿Ves la planta? ¿Ves tu esposo? Después de 40 años de matrimonio, no soy mejor que la planta.
Then Señora Sanchez had an idea. She decided to use an a personal a, in front of her husband in her sentences.
Veo a mi esposo. Veo mi planta, pero veo a mi esposo.
And from that day forward, Spanish speakers everywhere use a personal a before direct objects when the direct object is a person.
Gracias, personal a.
The personal a. Another great moment in the history of Spanish.
Hopefully you're beginning to get comfortable with figuring out the roles all the nouns in a sentence play.
I am.
Good, okay.
Yeah. And if you're wondering why you need to know all this stuff, wonder no longer. As you probably know from English, wherever you have a noun, you can replace it with a pronoun.
I'm no longer wondering.
Good.
Good.
Imagine what our lives would be like without pronouns.
Stan likes pretty hair. Stan thinks Judy has pretty hair. Stan thinks Stan wants to dance with Judy.
Judy's gonna dance with someone who uses pronouns.
Sounds silly, doesn't it? Well, that's exactly how you're going to sound unless you learn how to use pronouns. Fortunately for Stan and all speakers of English and Spanish, we do have pronouns. As you know, pronouns are used to take the place of nouns in a sentence. That way, you don't have to repeat the same words over and over.
I like your hair. It's nice.
You want to dance?
I'd love to.
So, the take-home lesson for pronouns. They replace nouns, they keep you from sounding annoying, and they rock. Let's look at some of the different kinds of pronouns floating around out there.
Section B, the object pronouns. Pronouns can basically be divided into two broad categories: subject pronouns, which replace the subjects of sentences, and object pronouns, which replace just about everything else.
That's right. Now, we've been using subject pronouns from the get-go, so we know that you know those.
That's why we're going to focus on the three kinds of object pronouns: direct, indirect, and objects of the preposition. What are you doing?
Focusing.
By now, you're probably pretty familiar with the subject pronouns. Yo, tú, usted, él, and ella, nosotros, vosotros, and ustedes, ellos, and ellas. We've been using them all along. Subject pronouns can be used to replace the subject of a sentence.
Pedro cuida el perro a Paula. Él cuida el perro a Paula.
Object pronouns work much the same way. First, let's take a look at direct object pronouns.
Here are our direct object pronouns.
Me, te, lo, y la, nos, os, los, y las.
There are two things to point out here. Notice that the you formal forms kind of got sucked into the third-person masculine and third-person feminine forms. Also notice how all of a sudden we can use the word it, lo and los, are used to replace masculine nouns, and la and las can be used to replace feminine nouns. Keep that in mind when your noun is an animal or an inanimate object.
And just like we changed Pedro into the subject pronoun él in our sentence, we can change our direct object, in this case, el perro, into its pronoun, which in this case would be the third-person masculine lo. Pedro cuida el perro a Paula. Pedro lo cuida a Paula.
In the sentence, Pedro lo cuida a Paula, we're basically saying Pedro takes care of it for Paula.
It being the dog, a.k.a. the animal Paula can't seem to find the precious time to take care of. I mean, when people go out and get pets and they don't have the time to take care of them, nothing...
Annie, it's just an example. Paul is not real. The dog is not real. It's just an example. As we were saying in the sentence, Pedro lo cuida a Paula, notice we put the direct object pronoun right in front of the verb cuida. That's because, well, that's where it goes. When you're using a direct object pronoun with a conjugated verb, the pronoun goes right in front of it.
The direct object pronoun goes before the conjugated verb.
Wait a second. I thought that the word no always comes before the verb if you want to make a sentence negative. Like if we say,
Pedro no cuida el perro a Paula. How can I put no and the direct object lo right in front of the verb? They both won't fit.
Good call. The object pronouns always beat out the word no, so they get to be closer to the verb.
So, in the sentence, Pedro no cuida el perro a Paula, when we replace the el perro with lo, we tuck it right in between the no and the cuida. Pedro no lo cuida a Paula.
So, to sum up, the direct object pronoun always beats out the no in the battle over who gets to be closer to the verb. While 90% of the time the direct object pronoun goes in front of the verb, occasionally there are exceptions. If you're using a direct object pronoun and the verb in the sentence is in its infinitive form or in its present participle form, then you have a couple choices. Let's go back to our example.
Pedro lo cuida a Paula.
Okay, here we know we have to put the object pronoun lo right before the conjugated verb cuidar. But what if the verb in our original sentence was in the infinitive form? Pedro va a cuidar el perro a Paula. Or its present participle form. Pedro está cuidando el perro a Paula. When the verb is in the infinitive or participle form, you can either put the pronoun in front of the first verb as you normally would.
Pedro lo va a cuidar a Paula. Pedro lo está cuidando a Paula.
Or attach it to the end of the last verb like this.
Pedro va a cuidarlo a Paula. Pedro está cuidándolo a Paula.
See? The lo can either go before the first verb or attach to the end of the last verb.
Ah, Pedro está cuidándolo a Paula. Qué simpático.
See? You can just stick the direct object pronoun lo to the end of the participle.
Did you notice how we had to put an accent on the A in cuidando when we attached the lo? Sometimes when you're attaching stuff to the end of verbs, you have to add an accent to maintain the integrity of the verb's pronunciation. If we didn't use the accent, cuidandolo would be pronounced cuidandolo, which sounds wrong.
The Translator 2000. It can translate anything. Bow down before its power. The Translator 2000 will now translate this Spanish phrase.
Tienes razón.
You are right. The Translator 2000 does it again. It can translate anything. Pop quiz answer time. In Spanish, the correct form for saying you are going to do something is be. Ir plus a plus infinitive. I'm going to go now.